All right, so today I want to talk about overcoming weariness. As we all go through life, one challenge we all face is with weariness. Weary is to lose your sense of pleasure and not feel the enjoyment that you should. And sometimes what happens is the battle in our life is taking longer than we'd like and we become weary. I think of my mom when she was going through cancer treatments. She gets diagnosed and she goes off to this specialist doctor and they say, okay, we'll give you this treatment for however many weeks. And she goes through it and she's feeling like, okay, I'm going to do this. She's optimistic. She's willing to follow the regimen and do everything right. And then she goes through it and finishes it and the doctor says, hate to tell you, but your markers aren't where we need them to be. You're going to have to do this again. And Mom was a happy-go-lucky kind of person, but this just squashed her. she was not happy and just very disappointed and feeling like, I don't know that I can do this again. And when the difficulty in our life is lasting longer than we expected, when we're working hard and not getting the results we're seeking, that's when we get weary. The hells have their strategies against us, and sometimes if they can't take us out in one shot, they'll just try to wear you down, grind you down. And many people suffer from what's essentially battle fatigue. We've been standing a long time to try to make change in our life. Maybe it's get rid of an addiction or praying for a disease to go away. But it hasn't happened yet. People go through life and say, I never believed I'd still be like this at this point in my life. Still trying to get through it. But what Paul writes in Galatians is, do not get weary in well-doing. Don't get weary in well-doing. The Lord knows that we're going to get weary. He knows it's going to happen. And that's why he says, don't get weary in well-doing. Keep going. Keep doing it. But just because you're well-doing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the results you're seeking. It may feel like your life's not making a difference. But the Lord's trying to encourage us. Says, look, stay strong. Keep going. Your due season is going to happen. It's going to happen. Your mind, the hells are going to give you all these excuses as to why it's not going to work out. You're going to say, you're too tired. You can't do this, But the Lord's going to encourage you. No. You're not too tired for your marriage. You're not too tired to do the right thing. Keep going. Keep going. If you dwell on the weary thoughts, that's what allows it to just kind of to set in and just slowly grind you down. You'll become more tired. You'll become more discouraged, more negative. Weariness comes to your mind, but you've got to open the door to let it really take over. The world will tell you there's plenty of reasons to believe why things are not going to work out. It's been just too long. But we're supposed to say no to those kind of things. No, I know my time will come. Things will change. I've been armed with the strength for this battle. That's what coming to church is supposed to be doing, arming you with the teachings to say, yeah, I can overcome this. David, King David that is, says we are to take hold of God's strength. That's what he did. He was doing the right thing, but things didn't work out for him very quickly. He could have been sour. He could have been upset. Think about his story. He starts off, we find him, he's out there tending his father's sheep. Do his brothers treat him very well when he wants to know what's going on in the battlefield? Nope. What are you doing here? What are you bringing here? You're just being nosy. Things aren't going very well for him. But he kept on doing the right thing. You could almost hear David saying under his breath, don't get weary in well-doing. Don't get weary in well-doing. Got to keep doing this right thing. He gets anointed king by Samuel. He does, but then what does he do? He goes and works for Saul playing the harp. And Saul he throws a spear at him, tries to take his life. It's very easy for David to get frustrated saying, man, aren't I supposed to be the king? Aren't I supposed to be the guy? I'm doing all right by Saul, and he's trying to take my life. And this went on for a long time. Instead, David just kept on doing the right thing. Kept on doing the right thing. Not worried about what Saul was doing. He just said, I'm going to do what's right by the Lord. It may not be fair what's happening to me, but I'm going to do what's right. You know, the exercise of this isn't the expectation that you won't ever have weary thoughts. I mean, surely weariness will come in some form or another, but the idea here is that when you're weary, and you have those weary thoughts, have the determination and the courage to say no to them, to send them back to where they came, to not let the battle fatigue really wear us down. One of the things you can take from the story of David is that when his temptation to give up might have been the greatest, it was just before the final victory actually came for him. You know, the healing victory takes place right after the darkest hour. Because if you look at the timeline for David's life, when Samuel anoints him, you know, we have 1 Samuel 17, so this is when the David and Goliath story is about to happen. Saul says to David, "You can't go against this Philistine, for you are a youth." So we don't know exactly how old he is, but he's probably 15, 17, somewhere in that area. But in 2 Samuel, we find out that in verse 4 there, David was 30 years old when he began to reign. So you're talking in the neighborhood of 15 years from the time he was anointed by Samuel to the time he actually took the throne. It's a long time, right? So there was no sign of any of this happening for many years. He keeps running from Saul. He keeps living with the Philistines and ducking this and hiding from this guy, and you know he's moving and shaking, but he's not getting the promise that Samuel had said. You're going to be king. Not happening. Well, near the end of this cycle, there's the story of Ziklag. David and his men go out. An enemy army comes in and they plunder everything they have in the town of Ziklag. They take all of David's family and all their possessions, and they kidnap it. The men come back, and the 600 men come back, and they find that the whole place is wiped out. You know, it's been burnt to the ground. You know, many people would have a situation like that happen to them and say, all right, that's it, I give up. This is not working out. This is just not working out. I give up. The last straw. You've taken everything. I thought this was supposed to happen, but apparently I misunderstood things. But what David did was the opposite. You know, he just, instead of throwing in the towel, he dug in his heels. He says, I have strength in the Lord. 1 Samuel 30 says, David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. They were tired, but he says, I'm going to strengthen myself in the Lord my God. And he gets his men to do it too, and the 600 of them go out. 200 of them say, oh, we're too tired, but the rest, they keep on, and they keep on going. The idea here is you can talk yourself into weariness, and you can talk yourself into strength. When you speak to yourself the right way, courage comes, vision comes, but every time you say, this is too hard, strength leaves. You say, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm so disappointed. I'm getting weaker. I can't believe this happened. All those kind of things just invite discouragement. But on the opposite side, if you say, I'm well able, I can do this. Lost last time, but I'm going to win next time. You invite strength. And the idea here is to not give the negativity strength by speaking it out. The scriptures say, let the weak say, I'm strong. You don't look in the Word and find scriptures that say, let the weak talk about their weakness. No, it's the opposite. Let the weak talk about how strong we are. The scripture doesn't say, let's talk about the sickness. Let's talk about the disappointment. Let's talk about the bad break. No, you don't find any of those stories here. It's all about, yeah, this is tough, but I have strength in the Lord. He's fighting my battles. He calls me to call on Him. And that's what it means to take hold of strength. I'll put it this way. If you wait on the Lord, He will renew your strength. Isaiah writes it. You'll mount up on wings like eagles. You will walk and not be faint. You will run and not be weary. Right? Now, it doesn't mean waiting, just sit back and do nothing, right? We know that. You know, the word wait in one of the translations we found was those who look for God's goodness and those who expect God's favor, who long for his blessing. So waiting is more than just hanging out. It's you kind of have an expectation, but doing something to kind of help bring that to effect. So waiting is supposed to be more of an active thing. Lord, thank you that you're going to turn this situation around. You know, in the movie last night, there was an example given we watched where two farmers pray for rain. And, well, one farmer, when he prayed for rain, he went out and he readied his field. He dug up the fields and made it prepared for rain. So which of the two farmers actually believed they were going to get the rain? Well, the one who made the preparations for it. And that's the kind of waiting the Lord's trying to get us to do here. We'll prepare for the goodness. It's going to happen. Get ready for it. Because that's the kind of stuff that causes your strength to be renewed. It's that expectation and that hope that you have God living in your life. It's the knowing that he's in control, that he can open doors that nobody can shut. He'll get you where you're supposed to be. So nothing's happened in your life that's a surprise to the Lord. Right? You know, we're weary over things not going the way they are, but at the end of the day, nothing's happened that's a surprise. It's just, part of God's plan for your life. And so like David, it might take a long time to sort some of these things out. He knows the plan. He said, all right, you're ordained, you're going to be the king, and it's just going to take some time to work it through it. So David stirred himself out of the weariness, and he got his men going on. And once they get all that Ziklag situation sorted out, it was 3 days later that Saul dies in battle. 3 days later, after the worst defeat he's ever had, Saul dies, and then he becomes anointed king. That's the way that the Lord works sometimes. As you get close to that promise, as you get close to seeing that new thing happen, you have your biggest setback. So maybe it's a sign that the victory is near, that things are about to turn around, that the breakthrough is on its way. Lots of people will tell you there's no such thing as an overnight success. You look at all these people who've been successful in life, who've had their overnight success. Then you hear their story about how they toiled around for 15, 20 years trying to get to that point where they had that overnight success. Any stand-up comedian will tell you, oh yeah, I'm an overnight success. No, I worked in clubs for 15 years, working all sorts of crazy hours to make it happen, and then it finally got my big break. Those 13 years David had to wait for his big break wouldn't have happened if he didn't know how to deal with battle fatigue. David could have told the Lord, it's just not going to happen. But he didn't. He stuck in there. These challenges along the way, they're there to strengthen us, to help us go along the way. It's not unrealistic to think you'll never be discouraged or tempted to be discouraged. But those temptations come along so we can learn how to deal with them. David wasn't superhuman. Right? I'm sure he had his moments where he wasn't great. But he still worked through it. And this happens in all sorts of good ways. I found another story about a guy who, like my mom, had cancer. And his was a brain cancer, and he was told he had 6 months to live. He had a surgery done to remove the tumor, and as you might imagine, the tumor came back. He then went into all the treatment, was taking it, and he was disciplined in his diet, did everything he was supposed to, and he made it 6 months that he was told he was going to live. He kept on it, but made it 6 more months, and he kept going it. And the observation that this guy will tell you is that I was always normal. If you met him, you wouldn't know he had this life-threatening disease. He still kept cheerful. He still kept upbeat. He worked on his inner self as far as his nutrition and his mind. Well, 3 years later, he was still going. And he gets in for the hospital for a scan, and they find no trace of the cancer. Well, the doctor comes to him after the test and after giving the test results, and he says, look, I'd really like for you to go to a support group for people who have brain cancer. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? I'm doing fine. He's like, oh yeah, it's not for you. I want you to go there to encourage everybody else who has brain cancer because you've kind of got this figured out of how to do well with it. He does right. He says, look, over the last 3 years, I've had plenty of times where I've been weary. Plenty of times where I've been tempted to take self-pity on myself. Plenty of times where it's not been as good as I put on the outside here. The doctor says, that's okay. You've also learned how to manage it and learned how to deal with it. So for some people, the weariness of fighting the disease is all-consuming. It just takes them over. So he's not perfect. But it's like Isaiah says, you trust in the Lord and you will mount up on wings like eagles. You'll run and not be weary. That's the idea that this guy was trying to go for. I'm just going to do right, not get weary in well-doing. Things might look impossible, but God can handle it. The final story I want to look at here today is from 1 Kings, and we talked about this recently with the kids. It's the story of Elijah. And you just think about this for a moment, where Elijah gets in a situation where he's calling on the false prophets of Baal, 450 of these guys, and he says, we're going to have this showdown as to who the real God is. Okay? Thing goes as well as Elijah could have expected. The false prophets don't get any fire. He gets fire from the Lord, comes down from heaven, burns up the altar, and he proves who the Lord is. Prophets of Baal, they all get wiped out in all this. So he's got to be feeling like, hey, this worked. But what happens? At the end of the story, Jezebel, Queen Jezebel, says, I'm going to kill you. This is in your order of service, the 1 Kings reading. It says, Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. I'm going to kill you just like the prophets of Baal were killed. And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. This guy just had a huge victory. He brought fire from heaven and beat 450 prophets, and all of a sudden one woman gets angry at him, and he runs for his life. There's a message there. There's a message there. But he went himself a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die. He said, it's enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Then he lay and slept under the broom tree. And suddenly an angel touched him and said, arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came back a second time, touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. So he arose, and he ate, and he drank, and he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights, as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. Sometimes when we get weary, there are practical issues as well. He needed some rest. He needed some food. He needed some water. Sometimes, that's all we need is a little bit of rest and food to combat our weariness. So often we hear in Scripture about the supernatural power of angels, and angels announcing the God's coming, angels closing the mouths of hungry lions, angels guiding a donkey off a path or whatever. Here the angel says, look, you just need some food. That's what you need. And as parents, Jen and I have seen plenty of times, we travel with Zach and we're going, and all of a sudden the kid gets cranky. And we go, why are you such a bad mood? And we go, he needs to be fed. In Munich and Hong Kong this year, we learned that lesson real well. Oh, you're bad? You need to be fed. That's what you need. And it's the same thing is true for us. Sometimes we just need to be fed. But we got to watch our mind too. We got to watch our mind and say, look, Lord, I know this is taking a while. This isn't going quite the way I planned, but I'm not going to get weary in well-doing. All these other people who've had success have had success because they stayed with it. They didn't get weary in well-doing. And eventually, the promises that was made to them came to pass. The same can happen for all of us. Amen.